Welcome, dear listeners, to another peaceful night under the stars. Tonight, let us embark on a journey to a distant land, where ancient kingdoms stand tall, and brave souls walk paths of destiny. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and allow the worries of the day to drift away. In the kingdom of Valoria, where towering mountains kiss the heavens and whispering winds carry the secrets of old, a young prince named Caspian faces a challenge that will shape the fate of his people. But for now, let us leave behind the trials and sorcery and simply listen to the story as it unfolds. Let the soothing tones of the tale guide you to a place of peace and wonder. Let the story's gentle rhythm lull you into a calm and restful sleep as the shadows of the night give way to dreams filled with courage, hope, and light. Now, settle in, relax, and allow the story to carry you away on a journey to Valoria. Chapter 1. The Awakening of the Sword. The wind howled through the towering spires of Valoria's castle, carrying with it the mournful whispers of a kingdom in despair. Prince Caspian stood alone in the great hall, his heart heavy with grief as he gazed upon the cold, lifeless body of his father, King Theron. The torches lining the walls flickered in the draught, casting eerie shadows that danced upon the ancient stone walls. The once vibrant hall, where laughter and music had often filled the air, now felt like a tomb. Caspian clenched his fists, his knuckles turning white as he struggled to contain the storm of emotions raging within him. His father had been the heart of Valoria, a king beloved by all, wise and just. But his sudden and mysterious death had left the kingdom vulnerable, and rumors of dark sorcery had begun to spread like wildfire. The people were afraid, and Caspian knew that it was now his duty to protect them, to uphold the legacy his father had left behind. With a deep breath, Caspian approached the throne, the place where his father had ruled with honor and strength. He knelt before it, the cool stone pressing against his knees, and bowed his head. "I swear by the gods and by the blood of my ancestors," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the wailing wind. "I will protect this kingdom from the darkness that threatens to consume it. I will not rest until the evil that took my father is vanquished." As he spoke, a sense of calm washed over him, as though the weight of his oath had steadied his heart. But it was short-lived. A cold shiver ran down his spine as he sensed a presence behind him. Rising to his feet, Caspian turned to find Lady Eloan, the kingdom's ancient seer, standing in the shadows. Her eyes, clouded with age but sharp with wisdom, bore into his. "The path you choose is fraught with peril, my prince," she said, her voice a raspy whisper that seemed to echo through the hall. "The darkness that has claimed your father is not of this world. It is a force older than time, driven by a hunger that cannot be sated." Caspian met her gaze, his resolve unshaken. I will face whatever comes, Lady Aloan. Tell me what I must do." The seer nodded slowly, as if weighing his words. "There is a weapon, forged in the fires of the earth by hands long forgotten. A sword that can cut through any magic, no matter how dark or powerful. It lies hidden in the heart of the mountains, where no mortal has dared to tread in centuries. If you are to stand a chance against the sorcerer Malakar, you must find this sword." Caspian's heart quickened at the mention of Malakar, a name that had only been whispered in the darkest of tales. "Malakar is behind this." Lady Aloan's expression darkened. "He seeks to plunge the kingdom into eternal night, to feed upon the fear and suffering of your people. He grows stronger with each passing day, and without the enchanted sword, you will not be able to stop him." The prince nodded, determination burning in his chest. "Then I will find this sword, and I will stop him." "Beware, Caspian," the seer warned, her voice like the rustling of dead leaves. "The path to the sword is perilous, and the trials you will face are not of this world. But if your heart remains true, and your courage does not falter, you may yet succeed." With a final glance at his father's lifeless form, Caspian turned and strode from the hall, his mind set on the journey ahead. He knew that the fate of Valoria rested on his shoulders, and he would not allow the darkness to claim his kingdom. The winds outside had calmed, but the storm within Caspian had only just begun. The kingdom of Valoria had once been a land of abundance, where golden fields stretched as far as the eye could see, and the laughter of its people echoed through the valleys. But now a pall of gloom hung over the land. The sky, once clear and bright, was perpetually overcast, as if the sun itself had turned its back on the kingdom. The crops withered in the fields, animals grew sickly and weak, and a sense of dread permeated the air. It was as if the very soul of Valoria was being drained, and the people whispered of a darkness that had taken hold. Prince Caspian rode through the villages, his eyes wide with concern as he witnessed the despair that had settled over his people. The roads were eerily quiet, with few travelers daring to venture far from their homes. Even the wind seemed to carry a mournful wail, as if the land itself was crying out for salvation. Everywhere he went, Caspian was met with the same fearful whispers, rumors of sorcery, of a malevolent force that was creeping ever closer to the heart of the kingdom. In the town of Rivermore, Caspian dismounted from his horse, the weight of his mission pressing heavily upon him. The townspeople, usually warm and welcoming, now watched him with hollow eyes, their faces etched with worry. He approached the town's well, where a group of villagers had gathered, their voices low and anxious. "It's the sorcerer, I tell you," an old man muttered, his voice trembling with fear. "He's cursed the land. Nothing grows, the animals won't eat, and the children, they're falling ill. It's him, Malakar. He's come to finish what he started." "Quiet, old man," A woman hushed him, her eyes darting around nervously. "You'll bring his wrath upon us." Caspian stepped forward, his presence commanding the attention of the crowd. "You have nothing to fear from speaking the truth," he said, his voice steady. "I am here to put an end to this darkness. Tell me what you know of Malika." The old man looked up at Caspian, his eyes filled with a mixture of hope and despair. "Malika was banished long ago, driven from this land by the power of the old king. But he swore he would return, that he would have his revenge. And now he has come back, more powerful than before. He's poisoning the very earth we stand on, draining the life from the land. If he is not stopped, Valoria will wither away, and we with it." Caspian listened intently, his mind racing. The tales of Malika had always been shrouded in mystery, a story to frighten children. But now those tales had come to life, and the sorcerer's threat was all too real. He could feel the weight of the kingdom's fate pressing down on him, the enormity of his task growing with each passing moment. "I will not let that happen," Caspian vowed, his voice firm with resolve. "I will find the means to defeat Malika and restore life to this land." A murmur of hope rippled through the crowd, but it was tinged with doubt. The people of Rivermore had seen too much suffering, and their faith had been shaken. But Caspian would not falter. He had made a promise to his father, to his people, and to himself. As the day wore on, Caspian sought out Lady Elowen once more. He found her in a secluded glade, surrounded by ancient oak trees, whose leaves whispered secrets to the wind. The seer was deep in thought, her gnarled fingers tracing patterns in the dirt. She looked up as he approached, her expression grave. "The shadow of sorcery is growing stronger," Caspian said, his voice laced with urgency. "Malika is draining the life from the land, and the people are losing hope. I must find the sword you spoke of, but I need your guidance." Lady Elowen nodded slowly, as if expecting his words. "The sword lies within the heart of the mountains, hidden in a forge long abandoned by time. But to reach it, you must pass through the Veil of Shadows, a place where the light does not reach, and where Malika's influence is strongest. Only the pure of heart can navigate its darkness." Caspian steeled himself, his determination unshaken. "I will face whatever lies ahead, no matter the cost. Valoria's fate depends on it." The seer gazed at him with a mixture of sorrow and admiration. "Then go, Prince Caspian, with the blessings of the gods. But remember this, courage alone will not see you through. You must trust in those who stand beside you, for it is together that you will find the strength to overcome the darkness." With her words echoing in his mind, Caspian turned away from the glade, his path now clear. He would gather his companions and journey to the mountains, to the place where the enchanted sword awaited. The shadow of sorcery loomed ever closer, But Caspian's resolve burned brighter. He knew that the fate of Valoria rested in his hands, and he would not allow Malika to claim victory. The mountains of Valoria loomed on the horizon like the jagged teeth of some ancient beast, their snow-capped peaks piercing the heavens. Prince Caspian and his companions, Sir Cedric and Lyra, stood at the foot of the range, their gazes fixed on the forbidding terrain before them. The journey had been long and treacherous, but the true test lay ahead. Somewhere within these towering heights was the hidden forge where the enchanted sword awaited, if they could survive the journey to claim it. The air grew colder as they began their ascent, the path steep and treacherous. The narrow trail wound through the craggy mountainside, often disappearing beneath drifts of snow and ice. The howling wind whipped at their cloaks, and the clouds overhead churned with a menacing darkness that mirrored the dread in their hearts. But Caspian pressed on, his determination unwavering. The fate of Valoria depended on their success. "Keep your eyes sharp," Caspian called over the roar of the wind. The seer spoke of trials that guard the path to the forge. We must be ready for anything. Sir Cedric, clad in his gleaming armour, nodded grimly. "We'll face whatever comes, my lord. We've come too far to turn back now." Lyra, her bow slung across her back and her eyes scanning the terrain with a hunter's precision, moved silently beside them. She had been Caspian's most trusted companion since childhood, her skill with the bow unmatched in the kingdom. "Something doesn't feel right," she murmured, her voice tense. "It's too quiet up here." As if in answer to her words, a low rumble echoed through the mountains, the ground beneath their feet trembling. Caspian drew his sword, the cold steel glinting in the dim light. The rumble grew louder, closer, until the very stones seemed to shudder with its force. Suddenly, the earth split before them, and from the gaping chasm emerged a creature born of the mountains themselves. A massive golem of stone and earth, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. The golem let out a roar that shook the mountains, and with a thunderous crash, it charged toward them, its massive fists poised to crush anything in its path. Caspian and Cedric braced themselves for the onslaught, but it was Lyra who acted first. She knocked an arrow to her bow and let it fly with a precision that belied the chaos around them. The arrow struck the golem's glowing eye, shattering it in a burst of light. The creature howled in pain, staggering back as its form began to crumble. But it was not defeated. The earth around them rumbled once more, and the golem began to reform, its shattered pieces reassembling with alarming speed. "We have to destroy it completely!" Caspian shouted, raising his sword. "Cedric, with me!" The two warriors charged forward, their blades flashing as they struck at the golem's weakened form. Caspian's sword bit deep into the creature's stony hide, but it was Cedric's mighty blow that cleaved the golem in two. The beast crumbled into a pile of rubble, the light in its eyes extinguished. Breathing heavily, Caspian surveyed the destruction. "It was a guardian," he said, his voice grim, a warning of what lies ahead. Lyra retrieved her arrow from the debris, her eyes narrowing as she studied the shattered stones. "There will be more," she said quietly. "The closer we get to the forge, the more dangerous it will become." Caspian nodded, the weight of their task heavy on his shoulders. "We press on. The sword is within our reach, and we cannot afford to falter." They continued their ascent, the path growing steeper and the air thinner with every step. The mountains seemed determined to break their resolve. But Caspian's thoughts were focused on the hidden forge and the enchanted sword that could save his kingdom. They climbed for hours, the light fading as the day turned to twilight. Just as the last rays of the sun dipped below the horizon, they reached a narrow ledge overlooking a deep chasm. "There," Lyra whispered, pointing to the far side of the chasm. Across the void, nestled within the mountain itself, was a massive door, carved from the very rock, with intricate runes glowing faintly in the dim light. "The entrance to the forge," Caspian breathed, a sense of awe and foreboding washing over him. The door was ancient, as old as the mountains themselves, and it pulsed with a power that resonated deep within him. But the path to the door was perilous, a narrow bridge of stone spanning the chasm. One misstep would send them plunging into the abyss below. Caspian swallowed hard, his heart pounding in his chest. This was the final test, the threshold they must cross to claim the enchanted sword. "Stay close," he ordered, his voice firm. "And watch your step. We're almost there." With that, Caspian led the way onto the bridge, the wind howling around them as they edged their way toward the hidden forge. The shadows of the mountains loomed all around, but Caspian's resolve was as unyielding as the stone beneath his feet. The sword was within reach, and with it, the salvation of Valoria. The door to the hidden forge stood before them, an ancient monolith etched with runes that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. Caspian could feel the power emanating from it, a low hum that thrummed in his bones. This was the place the seer had spoken of, the forge where the enchanted sword awaited, but the way forward was still barred by the unknown. Caspian reached out, his hand trembling slightly as he touched the cold stone. The runes flared brightly, and the massive door creaked open with a groan that echoed through the mountains. Beyond the threshold was a cavernous chamber, the walls lined with crystals that bathed the room in an eerie blue light. The air was thick with the scent of ancient magic, and the temperature dropped as they stepped inside, their breaths visible in the chill. "Be on your guard," Caspian warned his companions as they ventured deeper into the forge. His voice echoed back at him, a ghostly reflection of his own words. The chamber stretched out before them, seemingly endless, with no sign of the sword. Instead, at the far end of the room, there was a large circular platform surrounded by 4 pillars, each glowing with a different colour: red, blue, green, and white. "The test of the elements," Lyra murmured, her eyes wide with wonder. "This must be it." Sir Cedric nodded, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. "It's a trial of the ancient powers: fire, water, earth, and air. We must prove ourselves worthy before we can claim the sword." Caspian approached the platform, his heart pounding in his chest. The moment he stepped onto it, the pillars flared to life and the entire chamber seemed to tremble. The air crackled with energy, and suddenly the platform was surrounded by a shimmering barrier of light. They were trapped within the circle, the pillars towering over them like silent sentinels. From the pillar of red light, flames erupted, swirling into the shape of a towering figure made of fire. It roared, the heat from its flames intense enough to make them step back. The first trial had begun, the trial of fire. Caspian could feel the heat searing his skin, but he steeled himself, raising his sword. "We have to defeat it together," he shouted, charging at the fiery figure. Sir Cedric and Lyra followed without hesitation. Cedric's sword clanged against the fiery being, but the heat forced him back. Lyra fired arrow after arrow, each one piercing the flames but seeming to do little damage. The creature advanced, its flames growing hotter, the air around them becoming almost unbearable. But Caspian noticed something. A small glowing orb within the heart of the fiery figure, pulsing with a different energy. "Aim for the core!" he yelled, his voice hoarse from the heat. With renewed determination, they focused their attacks on the orb. Caspian's sword slashed through the flames, each strike weakening the creature, until with a final blow, the orb shattered. The fiery figure roared one last time before dissolving into embers, leaving only a faint warmth behind. No sooner had they caught their breath than the pillar of blue light activated, and the ground beneath their feet turned to ice. From the pillar emerged a figure made entirely of water, its form fluid and ever-changing, but with an icy core that radiated cold. The trial of water had begun. The battle was harder than the first. The water figure moved with speed and agility, slipping past their attacks like a river around rocks. Its icy touch sent shivers through them, numbing their limbs. But they fought on, relentless in their determination. Lyra's arrows found their mark, chipping away at the creature's icy core, while Cedric's sword slashed through its watery form. Caspian summoned all his strength, focusing on the glowing core within the water figure, and with a mighty thrust, he drove his sword into it. The water exploded outward, drenching them in freezing cold, but the figure was gone. 2 trials remained. The pillar of green light pulsed, and the ground trembled as a massive figure of stone and earth rose before them. Its eyes were like glowing emeralds, and its footsteps shook the very foundations of the chamber. The trial of Earth had begun. The creature was slow but powerful, each of its movements causing the ground to quake. It swung its massive arms, attempting to crush them beneath its weight. But Cedric, ever the brave knight, held his ground, blocking its blows with his shield, while Caspian and Lyra attacked its core, a glowing green crystal embedded in its chest. The battle was grueling, the creature's strength seeming endless. But finally they broke through its defenses. With a combined effort, they shattered the green crystal, and the earth figure crumbled into dust, the tremors subsiding. The final trial was upon them. The pillar of white light glowed, and the air around them swirled with a powerful wind. A figure formed from the very air itself, invisible save for the faint shimmer of its outline and the gusts of wind it generated. The trial of air was the most elusive and the most dangerous. The creature's attacks were swift and unpredictable, the wind slicing through the air like blades. It was difficult to see, let alone strike. But Caspian, Cedric, and Lyra worked together, using the wind's patterns to anticipate the creature's movements. Slowly but surely they wore it down, until finally Caspian landed the final blow, striking at the heart of the wind creature. The air stilled, and the figure dissipated into nothingness. As the last trial ended, the pillars dimmed, and the barrier of light around the platform disappeared. In the center of the platform, where the four elements had converged, a pedestal rose from the ground, and upon it lay the enchanted sword. The blade was like no other, glowing faintly with a light of its own, and the hilt was intricately crafted, fitting perfectly into Caspian's hand as he reached for it. He lifted the sword, feeling its power resonate with his very soul. The trials had proven him worthy, and now the sword was his. With this weapon, he could face Malika and the darkness that threatened to consume his kingdom. The forge had given up its greatest secret, and as they turned to leave, Caspian knew that the true battle was just beginning. The enchanted sword was his to wield, but the shadow of sorcery still loomed over Valoria, and the final confrontation with Malika awaited. The journey back to Valoria was swift, but the weight of what lay ahead hung heavy over Prince Caspian and his companions. The enchanted sword, now securely in Caspian's possession, seemed to pulse with anticipation, its blade shimmering faintly even in the darkness of night. It was as though the sword itself sensed the looming battle, eager to be wielded against the forces of darkness that threatened the kingdom. As they approached the outskirts of the kingdom, the signs of Malika's influence became painfully clear. The once lush fields were now barren, reduced to cracked earth and withered plants. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and an unnatural silence pervaded the land. It was as if the very life had been sucked out of the kingdom, leaving behind only a shadow of its former glory. "We must move quickly," Caspian said, his voice tight with urgency. Every moment we delay gives Malika more time to strengthen his hold on the kingdom. Sir Cedric nodded, his expression grim. The people are counting on us, my lord. We cannot fail them. Lyra's sharp eyes scanned the horizon, her bow at the ready. We should expect an attack at any moment. Malika knows we're coming, and he won't let us reach the castle without a fight. Their words proved prophetic. As they neared the castle, the sky darkened unnaturally, and a thick fog began to roll in, obscuring their path. The air grew colder, and a chilling wind whipped around them, carrying with it the distant sound of unnatural voices, whispers of malice that sent shivers down their spines. "Prepare yourselves," Caspian warned, gripping the hilt of the enchanted sword. The blade seemed to hum in response, its light piercing through the fog. Out of the mist emerged Malika's minions, twisted creatures of darkness, their forms barely human, their eyes glowing with malevolent intent. They moved with eerie silence, their footsteps leaving no mark on the ground as they approached, their dark weapons glinting ominously in the fading light. Caspian raised the enchanted sword, its light flaring as it sensed the presence of evil. "Stand your ground!" he shouted, his voice cutting through the oppressive silence. "For Valoria!" The first of the creatures lunged at Caspian, its blade aimed for his heart. But the enchanted sword met the attack with a brilliance that momentarily blinded the creature. Caspian slashed through its form, the sword cleaving through the dark magic that held it together as if it were no more than shadow. The creature let out a screech of agony before dissolving into black mist, leaving nothing behind. The battle was fierce, the air thick with the clash of steel and the cries of the dying. But Caspian, Cedric, and Lyra fought with the strength of the gods themselves, their movements perfectly synchronized, their will unbreakable. The enchanted sword cut through Malika's dark magic with ease, each strike dispersing the creatures that sought to overwhelm them. Despite their numbers, the dark minions were no match for the power of the enchanted sword. With every enemy felled, Caspian felt a surge of hope, the light of the sword growing brighter with each victory. But he knew that these were merely Malika's pawns, sent to delay them. The true battle lay within the castle, where the sorcerer awaited. The fog began to lift as the last of the creatures fell, revealing the castle gates ahead. They stood battered and cracked, evidence of Malika's relentless assault. The castle itself was a shadow of its former grandeur, its walls blackened by dark magic, its towers shrouded in swirling clouds. Caspian wiped the sweat from his brow, his breath heavy, but his resolve unwavering. "This is only the beginning," he said, his voice steady. "Malika is inside, and he will not go down without a fight. But we have the sword, and with it, we can end this once and for all." Sir Cedric placed a hand on Caspian's shoulder, his grip firm. "We're with you, my lord. To the end." Lyra nodded, her eyes fierce. "For Valoria." Together they pushed open the castle gates, the ancient wood groaning under the strain. Inside, the darkness was thicker, more oppressive, as if the very air was tainted by Malaka's presence. The enchanted sword's light flickered, a beacon in the gloom, guiding them forward. As they crossed the threshold, a voice echoed through the darkened halls, cold and mocking. "So, the prince returns, armed with a toy he does not understand. Do you think that sword can save you, Caspian? Do you think it can save your people?" Caspian gritted his teeth, his grip tightening on the sword's hilt. "This sword will be your undoing, Malaka. Your reign of terror ends tonight." A dark chuckle reverberated through the halls. "We shall see, Prince. We shall see." The voice faded, leaving behind an ominous silence. Caspian exchanged a glance with his companions, each of them steeling themselves for what lay ahead. The final confrontation was near, and with the enchanted sword in hand, they would face Malaka and end the shadow that had fallen over Valoria. The battle was far from over, but with the sword's first strike, the tide had begun to turn. Chapter 2. The Battle for the Kingdom. The skies over Valoria had darkened beyond natural night, as if a black shroud had been cast over the land, suffocating the light. The air was thick with tension, each breath heavy with the taste of impending doom. From the high battlements of the castle, Prince Caspian gazed out over his kingdom, the weight of his responsibility pressing heavily upon him. The enchanted sword hung at his side, its soft glow a constant reminder of the power he now wielded, but also of the immense task that lay ahead. The castle's courtyards, once bustling with activity, were now filled with soldiers preparing for battle. The clatter of armor and the sharpening of swords echoed through the stone walls, a grim symphony of war. The people of Valoria, those who had not fled in terror, huddled within the castle's fortified walls, their faces pale with fear. They looked to Caspian as their last hope, their silent pleas for salvation etched into every anxious glance. "The storm is gathering," Sir Cedric said, stepping up beside Caspian, his weathered face set in a determined frown. He scanned the horizon, where black clouds churned like a brewing cauldron, shot through with occasional flashes of eerie green lightning. Malaka's power is growing. He's preparing to unleash his full fury upon us. Caspian nodded, his jaw clenched. He knows we're coming. The sword has already weakened his hold on the land, and now he seeks to strike before we can reach him. Lyra joined them, her bow slung across her back, her expression grim. "The people are terrified, Caspian. They've seen what Malaka's darkness can do. But they also believe in you. They believe in the sword." Caspian turned to his companions, his gaze steady. "Then we must not let them down. We will not allow Malaka to take this kingdom. We will face him, and we will end his reign of terror, once and for all. The winds howled louder, as if in response to his words, whipping through the battlements and causing the torches to flicker wildly. The sky above seemed to roil with anger, the green lightning crackling more frequently, illuminating the storm clouds in brief, sickly flashes. The people must be ready to defend the castle, Caspian continued, his voice firm. If Malachar intends to break through our defenses, he will find us prepared. But our true battle will be within the castle walls. He will expect us to seek him out, and that is exactly what we shall do. Sir Cedric placed a reassuring hand on Caspian's shoulder. We'll give them everything we've got, my lord. The men are ready to fight to the last breath. Lyra nodded in agreement. And I will ensure that Malachar's minions never reach the inner sanctum. The archers are in position and will hold the walls as long as we can. Caspian felt a swell of pride at their loyalty and courage. He had chosen his companions well, and they had never wavered, not even in the face of such overwhelming darkness. Then let us prepare, he said, his voice filled with resolve. We'll strike before the storm can break. Malachar will not know what hit him. With a final glance at the churning sky, Caspian turned and descended the battlements, his mind focused on the battle to come. The castle's interior was a hive of activity, with soldiers donning armor, sharpening weapons, and saying quiet prayers to the gods. Caspian moved among them, offering words of encouragement and resolve, his presence a beacon of hope amidst the gathering gloom. As he made his way to the grand hall, where the final preparations were being made, Caspian could feel the tension in the air. The castle itself seemed to tremble in anticipation, as if it too understood the significance of the coming battle. The enchanted sword at his side pulsed with a faint light, its magic resonating with the rising energy of the storm outside. When he reached the grand hall, Caspian found it filled with the kingdom's leaders. Commanders, knights, and advisors all gathered to hear his plan. The room was lit by the flickering glow of countless candles, their light barely holding back the encroaching darkness. Caspian took his place at the head of the table, his eyes sweeping over the assembled faces. We stand at the brink of war, he began, his voice strong and clear. Malachar has brought his darkness upon our land, and he believes he can break us. But he is wrong. We have the strength, the courage, and the power to resist him. And with this sword, we have the means to destroy him. He drew the enchanted sword from its scabbard, holding it aloft for all to see. The blade glowed with a pure, radiant light, casting long shadows on the walls. The sight of it seemed to fill the room with a renewed sense of hope, a reminder that they were not fighting in vain. Tonight we will face Malachar, Caspian continued, his voice unwavering. We will confront him in the heart of this castle where he has made his lair. We will not wait for him to bring the fight to us. We will take the fight to him. Together we will end this darkness and restore the light to Valoria." The room erupted in a chorus of agreement, the men and women around the table pounding their fists in solidarity. Caspian sheathed the sword, feeling the weight of their trust and resolve. The time had come. The storm was nearly upon them, but with the enchanted sword in his hand and his companions by his side, Caspian knew they had the power to weather it. As the storm raged outside, the final preparations were made. The battle for Valoria was about to begin, and the fate of the kingdom would be decided within the darkened halls of the castle. The castle walls echoed with the ominous sound of the storm raging outside. The air was thick with the scent of fear and anticipation, the soldiers' breaths coming in short, tense bursts as they prepared for the inevitable clash. Prince Caspian stood in the grand hall, his gaze fixed on the enchanted sword at his side, the blade pulsing faintly in the dim light. He could feel the magic within it, a power that thrummed with life, waiting to be unleashed. But with that power came a heavy burden, one that only he could bear. Suddenly, a low, mocking laugh filled the air, reverberating through the stone walls like the tolling of a death knell. The flames in the torches flickered wildly, casting eerie shadows that danced across the room. Caspian's heart pounded in his chest as the laughter grew louder, more menacing, until it seemed to echo from every corner of the hall. "Caspian, Prince of a dying kingdom," the voice hissed, dripping with malice. "You think you can stop me? You think that sword will save you?" The voice was unmistakable. Malakar. The sorcerer's presence filled the room like a suffocating fog, his words laced with venom and dark magic. Caspian tightened his grip on the hilt of the enchanted sword, his jaw clenched in determination. "Show yourself, Malakar," he commanded, his voice cutting through the oppressive darkness. "Face me if you dare!" A gust of wind swept through the hall, extinguishing the torches and plunging the room into darkness. The soldiers gasped, their weapons drawn as they tried to peer through the inky blackness. But Caspian stood his ground, his eyes locked on the faint glow of the enchanted sword. He knew Malakar was trying to unsettle him, to weaken his resolve, but he would not falter. The darkness shifted, coalescing into a swirling mass at the far end of the hall. Slowly, the shadows took form, solidifying into the twisted figure of Malakar. His eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and his face was a mask of malevolent glee. He wore a cloak of midnight black, the edges of which seemed to blur and meld with the surrounding darkness. In one hand, he held a staff crowned with a dark crystal that pulsed with sickly green energy. "You are bold, Prince," Malakar sneered, his voice like the hiss of a serpent. "But boldness is not enough to save you. You stand before me with your father's sword, but do you truly understand its power? Do you think it alone will defeat me? Caspian met the sorcerer's gaze without flinching. "This sword was forged to cut through any magic," he said, his voice steady. "And with it, I will end your reign of terror." Malaka's laughter rang out once more, colder and more chilling than before. "Ah, the confidence of youth," he mocked. "You may wield that sword, but you are nothing more than a child playing at war. You have no idea what true power is, Caspian, but I will show you." With the flick of his wrist, Malaka sent a wave of dark energy surging through the hall, the force of it slamming into the soldiers and sending them sprawling. Caspian raised the enchanted sword just in time, the blade cutting through the magic and dissipating it in a burst of light. But the effort left him breathless, the raw power of Malaka's attack shaking him to his core. "You see, Prince?" Malaka taunted, his eyes gleaming with triumph. "Even your precious sword cannot save you from my power. You cannot hope to stand against me." Caspian straightened, his resolve hardening. "I will stand against you, Malaka," he declared, raising the sword high. "For my father, for my people, and for Valoria, I will defeat you." The sorcerer's smile faded, replaced by a look of cold fury. "Then face me, Caspian," he snarled, his voice echoing with dark magic. "Face me and meet your doom." The ground beneath their feet trembled as Malaka unleashed his full power, the air crackling with energy. The walls of the castle shook, dust and debris raining down as the sorcerer's magic filled the hall with a maelstrom of darkness. Caspian felt the weight of the storm pressing down on him, but he held his ground, the enchanted sword glowing brighter in his hand. With a roar, Caspian charged forward, the sword cutting through the swirling darkness as he closed the distance between himself and the sorcerer. Malaka raised his staff, the dark crystal at its tip pulsing with energy. But Caspian was faster. He brought the sword down in a sweeping arc, the blade slicing through the staff and shattering the crystal with a burst of light. Malaka screamed in rage and pain, his form flickering as the magic sustaining him began to unravel. But even as he staggered back, the sorcerer's eyes blazed with fury. "This is not over, Prince," he spat, his voice filled with venom. "I will not be defeated so easily." The sorcerer's form dissolved into shadow, retreating into the darkness of the castle. But Caspian knew this was not a victory. Malaka was wounded, but far from defeated. The true battle was still to come. Caspian lowered the sword, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The hall was silent, the storm outside echoing the turmoil within his heart. He had faced Malaka and survived, but the sorcerer's challenge had only just begun. The final confrontation awaited, and Caspian knew that the fate of Valoria would be decided in the heart of the darkness that Malaka had woven into the castle itself. The storm outside raged with a fury that mirrored the turmoil within the castle walls. Malaka's presence had left the air thick with foreboding. and the very stones seemed to tremble in anticipation of the coming battle. Prince Caspian, with the enchanted sword in hand, stood at the ready with his companions, Sir Cedric and Lyra, as they prepared to face the onslaught of Malika's dark forces. The courtyard of the castle, once a place of serene beauty, had been transformed into a fortress of war. Barricades were hastily constructed, and soldiers lined the walls, their faces grim as they stared out into the swirling darkness beyond. The sound of distant drums echoed through the night, a steady, ominous rhythm that sent chills down the spines of even the bravest warriors. The siege had begun. "Look!" Lyra called out, pointing to the shadows beyond the castle's outer wall. "They're coming!" Through the haze of fog and darkness, the first of Malika's minions appeared. Hordes of twisted creatures, their eyes glowing with malevolent intent. They moved as one, a seething mass of darkness that poured towards the castle gates like a living wave. The ground trembled beneath their onslaught, and the air was filled with their guttural growls and the clatter of their weapons. "Archers, ready!" Sir Cedric commanded, his voice carrying over the din. The archers along the battlements notched their arrows, their hands steady despite the fear that gripped their hearts. "Loose!" A volley of arrows sliced through the air, their tips glinting in the dim light as they rained down upon the advancing horde. The creatures shrieked as the arrows found their marks, but for every one that fell, two more took its place. The wave of darkness pressed on, relentless and unyielding. "They're too many," Lyra muttered, her eyes narrowing as she fired arrow after arrow. "We can't hold them all off." Caspian gripped the enchanted sword tightly, feeling its power surge through him. The sword's light blazed in the darkness, a beacon of hope amidst the encroaching doom. "We must hold the line," he said, his voice firm. "If they breach the gates, all will be lost." The creatures reached the castle walls, their claws and weapons striking against the stone with a sound like thunder. The soldiers braced themselves as the first of the attackers began to scale the walls, their twisted forms clinging to the stone like spiders. The battle was fierce, the air thick with the clash of steel and the cries of the wounded. Caspian fought with a fury born of desperation, the enchanted sword cutting through the creatures with ease. Each strike sent a pulse of light through the darkness, dispersing the foul magic that held the creatures together. But the onslaught was relentless, and Caspian could feel the weight of the battle pressing down on him. Beside him, Sir Cedric fought valiantly, his sword a blur as he hacked through the ranks of Malika's minions. But even the seasoned knight was beginning to tire, his breath coming in ragged gasps as the creatures swarmed around him. Lyra too was fighting fiercely, her arrows flying with deadly precision. But the numbers were overwhelming. "We can't hold them!" a soldier cried out as the gates began to buckle under the weight of the attackers. "They're breaking through!" Caspian's heart pounded in his chest. He knew that if the gates fell, the castle, and all within it, would be lost. Summoning every ounce of strength he had left, he raised the enchanted sword high, its light blazing brighter than ever before. "To me!" he shouted, his voice echoing through the chaos. "We make our stand here!" The soldiers rallied to his call, their fear giving way to determination as they formed a defensive line in front of the gates. Caspian positioned himself at the center, the enchanted sword glowing with a power that seemed to invigorate the men around him. With a roar, he led the charge, driving back the creatures that threatened to overwhelm them. But just as hope began to flicker in their hearts, a deafening crack echoed through the courtyard. The gates, weakened by the relentless assault, finally gave way, splintering into pieces as the full force of Malakar's horde poured into the castle. The ground shook with the impact, and the soldiers staggered back, their faces pale with terror. "All is not lost!" Caspian shouted, his voice cutting through the rising panic. "Hold your ground!" But even as he spoke, a figure emerged from the darkness. A massive creature, larger and more fearsome than any they had faced before. Its eyes burned with a green fire, and in its hand it wielded a massive jagged blade that crackled with dark energy. It was a creature of pure malevolence, born of Malakar's darkest magic, and it advanced with a single purpose: to destroy all in its path. The soldiers faltered, their courage wavering in the face of such overwhelming power. But Caspian stepped forward, the enchanted sword blazing with renewed vigor. He knew that this was the moment that would decide the fate of Valoria. The moment when he would either stand victorious or fall in defeat. "For Valoria!" he cried, charging towards the creature, his sword cutting through the darkness like a ray of light. The creature roared in defiance, its blade swinging down to meet Caspian's with the force that shook the very earth. The battle was joined, and the fate of the kingdom hung in the balance. The clash of blades reverberated through the castle courtyard as Prince Caspian faced the monstrous creature, their battle the eye of the storm that raged around them. The creature's jagged sword, crackling with dark energy, met Caspian's enchanted blade with a force that sent sparks flying into the air. The ground beneath them trembled, cracks spider-webbing outwards with each thunderous strike. The soldiers fought valiantly around them, holding back the tide of Malakar's minions. But the focus of the battle had shifted. All eyes were on Caspian and the creature, the outcome of their duel determining the fate of the kingdom. The enchanted sword blazed with light, cutting through the darkness that clung to the castle like a shroud. But the creature was relentless, its strength fueled by the malevolent power of Malakar himself. "You cannot win, Prince," the creature hissed, its voice a guttural snarl that seemed to echo from the depths of the earth. "Malakar's power is absolute. He will crush you, and your kingdom will fall. Caspian gritted his teeth, every muscle straining as he blocked another devastating blow. The force of the attack sent him skidding back, his boots digging furrows in the stone. But he did not falter. He could feel the power of the enchanted sword coursing through him. A strength that came not just from the blade, but from the will to protect his people. Valoria will not fall, Caspian shouted, his voice ringing out across the battlefield. As long as I stand, there is hope. With a surge of energy, he countered the creature's attack, the enchanted sword slicing through the air with blinding speed. The blade struck true, cutting deep into the creature's side. A howl of pain and rage erupted from its twisted maw as black, smoking ichor spilled from the wound. The dark magic that had held the creature together began to waver, the green fire in its eyes flickering. But the creature was not yet defeated. It roared, a sound that shook the very foundations of the castle, and lunged at Caspian with renewed fury. The air around them crackled with energy as they clashed again and again, each strike sending shockwaves through the courtyard. The soldiers watched in awe, their own battles momentarily forgotten as they witnessed their prince stand against the embodiment of darkness. Caspian could feel his strength waning, each movement growing heavier, each breath more labored. The creature was weakening, but so was he. The weight of the battle, the endless onslaught was taking its toll. But he knew he could not stop, not now, not when the fate of everything he loved hung in the balance. In a moment of clarity, Caspian saw his chance. The creature, blinded by its own rage, left itself open. Its guard dropped for just a fraction of a second. With every ounce of strength he had left, Caspian surged forward, the enchanted sword glowing with a blinding light as he plunged it deep into the creature's chest. The creature let out a scream that echoed through the mountains, a sound of pure agony as the light of the enchanted sword burned through the darkness within it. The green fire in its eyes extinguished, and the dark energy that had fueled it dissipated into the air like smoke. The creature staggered, its form crumbling, until finally it collapsed to the ground in a heap of ash and shadow. A moment of silence fell over the battlefield, the only sound the distant rumble of thunder from the storm overhead. Then, slowly, the soldiers began to cheer, their voices rising in a crescendo of relief and triumph. The tide had turned. The creature was defeated, and the dark forces that had besieged the castle began to retreat, their will broken. But Caspian knew the battle was not yet over. As the creature's ashes scattered in the wind, a cold voice filled the air, a voice that dripped with malice and power. "Impressive, Caspian," Malaka's voice hissed from the shadows, the very walls of the castle seeming to pulse with his presence. "But this is far from finished. You have only delayed the inevitable. Come, face me in the heart of this castle, if you dare, There we shall see who truly commands the power of the sword. Caspian's heart pounded in his chest, but his resolve remained unshaken. He sheathed the enchanted sword and turned to his companions, Sir Cedric and Lyra, who had fought bravely by his side. "This ends tonight," Caspian said, his voice firm. "We will confront Malika in the throne room. Together, we will bring him down." Cedric nodded, his expression grim but determined. "We're with you, my lord, to the end." Lyra's eyes gleamed with the fire of battle. "Let's finish this." With a final glance at the battlefield, where the soldiers were regrouping, and the last of Malika's minions were being driven back, Caspian led the way into the castle. The halls were dark and silent, the air thick with the presence of evil. Every step they took echoed through the stone corridors, the tension growing with each passing moment. At last, they reached the doors to the throne room. Caspian pushed them open, the heavy wood creaking ominously as they stepped inside. The room was filled with darkness, the only light coming from the faint glow of the enchanted sword. And there, at the far end of the room, stood Malika, his twisted form shrouded in shadow, his eyes gleaming with malevolent intent. "Welcome, Prince," Malika purred, his voice like poison. "You've come so far, but your journey ends here. The power of the sword will be mine, and Valoria will fall." Caspian drew the enchanted sword, its light blazing in the darkness. "This is the end, Malika. For you." The final confrontation had begun. The throne room was a cavern of shadow and malice, the air thick with the oppressive weight of Malika's presence. Darkness curled like smoke around the twisted form of the sorcerer, his eyes gleaming with a malevolent light that seemed to pierce through the gloom. The walls of the chamber, once adorned with the banners of Valoria's proud history, were now draped in the sorcerer's taint, blackened, twisted, and corrupted by his dark magic. Prince Caspian stood at the threshold, the enchanted sword held aloft, its radiant light cutting through the thick shadows like a beacon of hope. Beside him, Sir Cedric and Lyra readied themselves, their faces set with determination. The final battle was upon them, and the fate of Valoria rested on the outcome. Malika's lips curled into a cruel smile as he stepped forward, his staff crackling with dark energy. "So, you have come to face me, Caspian. How noble, how utterly futile," he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "You wield a weapon of power, but you are nothing more than a child grasping at forces beyond your comprehension." Caspian's gaze was steely, unwavering. "You've brought nothing but death and despair to this kingdom," he replied, his voice firm. "But your reign of terror ends now. I will defeat you, and Valoria will be free." Malika let out a harsh laugh, the sound echoing through the chamber like the crack of a whip. "Defeat me? You overestimate your strength, Prince. I have woven my power into the very fabric of this land. With a mere thought, I can bring this castle to the ground, reduce your people to ashes." Caspian tightened his grip on the enchanted sword, feeling its power pulse through him. A steady rhythm that matched the beating of his heart. "Then try," he challenged, his voice cold as steel, "and see what happens when you face the light." The battle began with a flash of light and shadow. Malika raised his staff, and from it surged a wave of dark magic, a torrent of pure malevolence that hurtled toward Caspian like a thunderstorm. But Caspian was ready. He met the wave with the enchanted sword, its blade flaring with blinding light as it cut through the darkness, dispersing the magic in a burst of energy. The clash of powers sent shockwaves through the throne room, the very air crackling with the force of their conflict. Malika snarled in fury, his eyes narrowing as he unleashed a barrage of spells, each one more deadly than the last. But Caspian moved with the fluidity of a warrior born, the sword in his hand guiding his strikes with the precision that seemed almost otherworldly. Lyra and Cedric joined the fray, their movements swift and coordinated. Lyra's arrows flew with deadly accuracy, each one aimed at the weak points in Malika's defenses, while Cedric's swordsmanship was a blur of steel and strength. Each strike aimed to keep the sorcerer off balance. But Malika was no mere mortal foe. With a snarl of rage, he summoned dark tendrils from the shadows, each one lashing out with the speed of a viper, seeking to ensnare and crush his enemies. Caspian barely had time to react, the tendrils coiling around his legs and arms, pulling him down with a force that threatened to rip him apart. "Feel the despair, Prince," Malika hissed, his voice filled with venom. "Feel the weight of your failure." But even as the darkness closed in around him, Caspian refused to give in. He could feel the power of the sword resonating within him, a wellspring of strength that surged through his veins. With a roar of defiance, he called upon that power, the blade of the sword flaring with a light so intense that it pierced the very shadows themselves. The tendrils recoiled, hissing like serpents as they shrank back from the light, releasing their grip on Caspian. He surged to his feet, the enchanted sword burning with a brilliance that filled the throne room with a blinding radiance. For a moment, it seemed as though the very air itself had turned to light, a pure, cleansing force that drove back the darkness. Malika screamed in rage, his form wavering, flickering like a candle in the wind. "No!" he howled, his voice twisted with fury and fear. "This cannot be!" But Caspian did not hesitate. With a powerful swing, he brought the sword down upon the sorcerer, the blade cutting through the dark magic that had sustained him, severing his connection to the shadows. The impact was like a thunderclap, the force of it shaking the very foundations of the castle. Malika's scream was cut short as the light consumed him, his form disintegrating into nothingness, leaving behind only a whisper of dark smoke that was quickly swept away by the radiance. The darkness that had clung to the throne room was gone, replaced by a warm golden light that filled every corner of the chamber. Caspian stood still for a moment, the sword in his hand still glowing faintly, as if reluctant to relinquish its power. The battle was over. Malika was defeated, his dark magic shattered, his reign of terror brought to an end. Lyra and Cedric stepped forward, their expressions a mix of relief and awe. "You did it, Caspian," Lyra whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "It's over." Caspian sheathed the sword, the weight of what had just transpired settling over him like a blanket. "It's over," he echoed, his voice soft. But even as he spoke the words, he knew that this was only the beginning, a new dawn for Valoria, one free from the shadow of Malika. As they stepped out of the throne room and into the light of the rising sun, Caspian felt a sense of peace wash over him. The storm had passed, and with it, the darkness that had threatened his kingdom. Valoria was safe, and the people would rebuild, stronger and more united than ever before. And as he looked out over the land, the light of the dawn spilling over the mountains and valleys, Caspian knew that a new era had begun, one where the light of hope would always prevail, and where the courage of a prince and his companions had forged a future free from fear. The enchanted sword, now at rest by his side, had fulfilled its purpose, but its story and the story of Valoria was far from over.